Hello, everybody. This is William Del Pilar, and this is your points on the board. And I am here with my cohort, Mr. Eddie Aparicio, El Matador de El Salvador. Man, I love saying that, Eddie. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing, Guillermo? I'm all good, man. I just recovered from COVID, my second time getting it last week, man. And it wasn't that bad. It was just like a regular flu. So, I'm not going to call it a COVID thing anymore. I'm just going to call it a flu because that's what it is now. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you take the vaccine? Are you
I,
vaccinated?
I did, but I did it so long ago. I haven't done any boosting. I just did the first and the second one, and I didn't want to do any more, honestly. I didn't even want to do it the first
Nah,
one.
I don't blame you. And some people were forced because of the job. It's like I tell people,
That's what
look,
happened.
I get it. I get it. You have a family to support, you have kids to support. We're not in a revolutionary era like we were back then. And the reason I
Right.
say that is when the Revolutionary War started, only 10% of colonists supported it. At its height, at its peak, America, only 45% of colonists supported the Revolutionary War. Revolutions are always a minority produced
Yep.
results driven. It's
Yep.
always the lesser people. So it's human nature to fall in line, and that's what I think this whole COVID thing. I'm a logical guy, and we'll get off the subject. It's not a political show, but I'm just a logical guy, Eddie. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a data guy,
Yep.
and I could not get over the hump of 99.9% recovery rate.
Yeah.
With seniors, 99.7. And I was getting infuriated because I'm like, this this is a scheme. This is a
Right.
con of some
There's an
sort.
agenda on
Be-
this thing, no doubt.
yeah, yeah. And then people, conspiracy, you're a conspiracist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. 99%, and I
Yeah.
just could not wrap my head around it. And since I work for myself, my wife does too, we did not get vaccinated. And I never looked down on the
Good for
vaccinated. I
you.
never did.
Good for you.
Uh,
Good for you,
but
man.
I push back now because I remind them, you wanted me dead. You wanted me in quarantine camps. You wanted everything in public taken away from me. There were organ donors who were, I mean, there were people who needed organs who were denied, Eddie, because they weren't vaccinated. Those are the people I loathe. I
That's
feel
crazy.
for that. Yeah, I feel for the everyday American who was forced to get it so they could put food on the table.
Yep.
I get angry at it. Maybe it's because of my upbringing, watching two dictators in action, having
Yep.
relatives where I'm told to shut up because they don't know who's listening and they don't need the little American visiting his family to say the
Yep.
wrong thing, and then my cousin gets hauled away. So maybe that's why I'm a little sensitive to that. But good for you
Well,
in the sense of
yeah.
you said it was
Yeah.
like the flu.
What's interesting though too, Guillermo. I mean, this is the last thing I'll bring up on this topic because we have a big show. We want to talk about other things other than just this. But what's interesting is that you don't hear anything about the media, any coverage on people just dropping dead, for no reason. And a lot of it, they're attributing it, at least some of the initial studies, to these vaccines, man. There's issues going on in your body that this thing's creating. And there's people just dying of, heart issues,
Hmm.
especially the young. And the media is not covering it, which is unusual. I mean, that's like what that tells me that right there's an agenda, right? So, anyway, that's
Well,
it.
I'm glad you said it like you did because you said it's unusual, and you stopped. You didn't finish. It's unusual because it's not unusual. In the '90s is when I slowly, because of Noriega and Panama, I was heavy into politics. I was heavy into the machine of
Yeah,
the political machine. And he who controls the media controls the country. That's
for
what it
sure.
boils down to. Universal. Did you know the last point, and then we're moving on, that back in the Roman eras, all the way back to the 1700s, after we became a country, they had what you call town criers. In Rome, it was called something else. But remember, there was no telephone, no telegraph, no radio, no television. So they would hire these people who would just be at the corners screaming, "Thomas Jefferson sleeps with us, so that, everything that they would. Some of the right, I've researched this. Some of the things they said, you're like, oh dear God. So because when people are like, politics has never been this bad, I'm like, then you don't know history. It's always been this
Right.
bad. Maligning your
Yeah.
opponent. So this is nothing new. I just get angry because this is the greatest country in the world, Eddie. It's exceptional. And if America falls, the world will eventually fall because we are the only we are bad people at times, our government. But overall, we are the
For sure.
only good white hat cowboys that can actually beat up a bad cowboy. There's no other. I'm serious.
Yeah,
France asked us when we were fighting, when we invaded Libya, hey man, we ran out of bombs. Can you give us a hand? The Brits, the last time they won a war, who knows? I mean, they beat up all the sheep on that down in Argentina when Margaret Thatcher did. Hell, we did the same thing. We beat up Grenada, Anyway, let's get going, brother. We got a great show for you guys tonight. We're going to talk about the return of one of the players on Eddie's favorite team, Draymond Green. And it's funny. I don't dislike Draymond Green. I'm like, boy needs some help, we're going to talk a little bit
yeah,
about that. We're going to talk about the something that Eddie's brought up a few times that isn't making big news. It's not big news, but it's an important part of basketball in the revenue generating machine, and it's the player participation policy. It's a new rule. Eddie's going to remind us what it is, and a team was finally fined for it. And fine, Eddie, what did you say, for the oddest reason? Because they weren't even superstar players. And from there,
exactly.
we're going to talk the NBA trade deadline. It's approaching on February 8th. I sent Eddie a list of a bunch of players. He's going to let us know who he thinks will be taken out of that group. And we're going to talk about this every week, Eddie. I assume that was an understanding when you brought it up until it happens, because I'm pretty sure between now and next week there could be a few trades. Then the following week.
For
So
sure.
it's always
There already is one they have one. There's one tonight that's on the books right now. It's about to happen.
there you
So
go.
we can
There
talk
you
about
go.
that.
And we're going to close the show out with the National Football League and Wild Card Weekend. Boy, I think there were only two teams, Eddie, that weren't considered upsets this week. Everybody else were, and this is what happens every year. People forget. We get blowouts in the first weekend since they had the extra team in there now. Remember how I talk about greatness, and we've had words good and bad about it, where you disagree or don't agree. But this is what I mean by greatness. When you make a mistake in the regular season, I'm like, yeah, okay, you can survive playing against the Atlanta Falcons with that mistake. You can't in the playoffs. And that's
For
why we
sure.
saw certain teams get rolled. And that's what I mean by greatness. It's kind of like the LeBron Curry. It's just a fine line, and people struggle to differentiate it. I asked my final. I asked my cousin, "Do you know who Steph Curry is?" She's Panamanian. No. I go, "Do you know who LeBron is?" "Oh yeah, I know who LeBron is." "You know Michael Jordan?" "Yeah, I know Michael Jordan." And so I'm like, I'm gonna go to the Eddie about that. But it's not that Steph Curry isn't a superstar. It's
Small sample size,
transcending the
man.
game. No, and you're right. It's not even a sample size. I mean, that wouldn't fly. That's anecdotal.
Right.
But one of my goals with Grumblings Media is to have a man on the street. I've loved that since Carson. If I remember, I think Carson. No, I know Jay Leno did it. They go out on the street, they just ask the questions. Oh, dude, it's fun.
Yeah, like that.
It's
Yeah,
fun
like
watching
that guy,
Leno.
Guillermo with Jimmy Fallon. The guy's freaking hilarious. You ever watch that guy? He just interviews a bunch of guys. That you talking about someone like that, right? That's the real
I haven't
cool
watched late
person.
night in years, but
Oh
yeah,
man, you
they
gotta watch.
and then you get shocked. You get shocked at some of the answers, like, dude, man, this is America. Where'd you go to school at? In a dungeon? The worst ones
Right.
are when they show a picture of the vice president. Nobody ever gets it, yeah. But I bet you if they show three butts and one of them was Kim Kardashian's, that's Kim's right there, buddy. They know that. So let's get to it. Let's get to it. All righty. Our first topic on tap is Draymond Green returns from a 12-game suspension. Eddie, before we get into the timeline, I'd like for you to talk about the timeline, but your first take, it was approximately a month suspension. That's about 14% of the league games, meaning he's been suspended for 14% of the season in terms of the games played. Do you think that suspension was long enough?
You know what? I mean, I think that the NBA didn't want to put a timeline on it because they wanted to show at least the perception or the impression that they care about the individual, and they didn't want to make it look like it was a penalty. So I think it's pretty apparent that Draymond Green has some anger issues. It's pretty evident. It's been a timeline, quite some time of a lot of his infractions, and it started. A lot of NBA, a lot of Warrior fans, since as beloved as beloved as Draymond Green is, there's a lot of, what, we could have had another championship if it wasn't for him. And
Oh
he's
yeah.
definitely been a detriment to the team, but he's also been like, a godsend to the team. I mean, the guy is essentially he's the heartbeat of the team. So he essentially makes the team work. Steph Curry's one of these quiet leaders. He leads by example. Really isn't
Mhm.
vocal. Draymond Green brings a sense of toughness to the team. He brings a leadership. He's a strong personality. He's the toughness of the team. And without him, they have a hard time, playing as a team, as what we know as the Golden State Warriors. So he's as vital as he is. He's also a detriment because of his conduct, right? And that's what the NBA started seeing this, and I'm glad they did it the way they did it, because it makes it look like it's not a penalty. It's more of we're here to try and help the individual. So is 12 games enough? It depends. It depends on what they're trying to get out of it right now, right? I think you're not going to get somebody changing their behavior completely, in therapy in 12 sessions or whatever, how many times they did these sessions over the course of that month period that they had, a little bit more than a month. So but they're going to get tools. People who are in therapy will tell you that you get tools to help go through your journey to overcome whatever it is that you're overcoming, and it starts from day one, and you're never going to get there until probably the end of the year, until the end of your life, realistically. But you're going to get better in time.
Right.
That's what these guys, I think that's what happened, is that they gave them some tools, and I saw it in action too. Actually, there was opportunities yesterday in yesterday's game against Memphis Grizzlies where he could have easily gotten pissed off, which he has done in the past, and he actually swallowed it. And I saw it multiple times. So obviously something worked. We shall see if it continues, right? But that's what
Mhm.
we're hoping, is that that he's actually gotten something out of this, so that he can apply it moving forward, so he doesn't get in trouble with refs, and doesn't get in trouble with doing any of these antics that he's done in the recent history with Rudy Gobert and then Yusuf Nurkic of the Suns, right? So that's what we're hoping that doesn't
Mhm.
happen.
It's my take is simple on this. Well, real quick for the audience out there, what Eddie's referring to, and I didn't realize it until I did my research because after the Shaq traveling cross country against the Portland Trailblazers for 2 straight years in the game sevens, I gave up on basketball. So when I was researching this, I did not realize that what Eddie was referring to cost him a championship. He's talking about the Cleveland series, and that was his first
Yes.
big issue where he got suspended for the next game, and they needed him. To another point, Eddie brings up indirectly is Steph Curry's the team. Can they replace Steph
Yes.
Curry? No. No, no, no. I'm
Whoa.
talking about could they replace Steph Curry? No, no, you can't replace. I mean, eventually another generational player will come around, but the odds are, you know. But can you replace a Draymond Green? Yes. But to Eddie's
Yes.
point, he was a glue of that team. We as fans, not me and you, but this is what irks me about the average fan. Steph Curry, Steph Curry. Oh, you don't need Draymond Green. No, Draymond Green plays a very important role. It's like Dennis Rodman did in Chicago, or Bill Laimbeer did in Detroit,
Right.
or Kevin McHale did for Larry Bird. There's the well, that's a bad example, but the players who don't get
Rick
on.
Mahorn. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, as far as Draymond Green, the tools are only good if the individual truly wants to be helped. And when you are forced to get help, like you have to go do this, or you're gonna be this suspended for this or that. Meaning, it's not the person who's decided I need help. I don't see the tools helping them long term, because they were forced to do this. But I'm not saying I'm right. That's just my thought. It's as I told Eddie off screen. I said, I don't care what he does this week, next week, or even the first month. I want to see how he's reacting for months. Because
Right.
early on, you're going to be on best behavior. And my final take on this is, I have no love for or hate for my fellow man. But I do want to see everybody be a good citizen, live a great, content life, live the exceptional American dream. And my concern for Draymond Green is who's the other violent guy from the '90s? I forget. Choke to choke Pete. the
Rashid,
coach.
Rashid. Oh, you're talking about Latrell Sprewell. Another. You're
Latrell
talking about Latrell
Sprewell. That was
Sprewell.
Golden State. That
Yeah,
was
another
no, no,
Golden
that was
State.
Sacramento, Golden State. Yeah.
Yes, United
He's
States
flat
Golden
broke
State.
now. Flat broke. Never learned. Always did it. He didn't realize they're trying to help me, but I'd
Right.
rather be a thug. That's what it boiled down to. So my whole hope for Draymond Green is he gets the help he needs. Because if not, it's I know this for a fact. I've talked to at least a dozen agents. Not a lot, but in my business, I didn't care. Somebody else handled the agent talk. But I became friends with an agent, and he told me, he goes, "Look, these players, they don't understand. This most players don't realize when they're that young, the money will stop. It's not infinite, but they act as if it
Absolutely.
is. So that's my
Absolutely.
concern for him. His
Yep.
his brutish behavior goes to a bar. Next thing you know, it's jail time and a $10 million payout, 15 million here.
Yeah,
So
and the
so
thing
that's where
is,
I get the
Guillermo,
help.
I mean, yeah, but here's the bottom line here is that, you know, it got to a point, and I think this is the other message that the NBA sent to him as well as the Golden State Warriors is like, look, this guy is getting very close to getting thrown out of this league, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
this was a drastic. This has never happened before. You've never seen a league put an indefinite suspension over something like this, which is not necessarily, again, they didn't try to make it a penalizing event. They try to make it like, hey, we're trying to help this kid. He needs all the help he can get. We're going to make it indefinite because there's no timetable for him to get that help that he needs, right? But the thing is, this guy is very, very close to, to getting kicked out of the NBA. So he's going to he's going to mind his P's and Q's now, in my opinion, in the short term, and we'll see, like you said, in the next 4 months where he's at, right? But the other thing that's also on the line is that he has a job after the NBA, and he's already got a contract with TNT. He's going to essentially be the replacement to one of those guys, whether it be Shaq, Charles Barkley or Kenny the Jet, or maybe just in addition to that team. He's got a contract with them, and he will lose out on that if he doesn't shape up. So I think he's gonna. Like I said, the signs are there that he looks like he changed at least for one game. We shall see for the remainder of the season. I think there's going to be teams that are going to try and test that, and they're going to egg him on, and we shall see if it
Right.
really what he learned
Right.
and he can
Right.
apply. Right,
Right, right. My only pushback on that is Warren Sapp and Darren Woodson or Charles Woodson. I can't remember for the NFL
Charles
Network.
Woodson.
They had the yeah Charles Wood. They had the dream jobs. One's in jail. The other one got fired for paying out to a whore on Super Bowl week. You know, so even though they have these things there, if they don't learn their lesson, they're going to screw those up too. So we'll hope for the best. But talk to us a bit about the timeline in terms of what led. And we don't have to get into it in depth, but I think it's important for the audience to know this isn't just one, two, or three. There's a multiple issue problem here with him. And just to remind the audience.
Yeah, it started back, the year that the Warriors had their 73 win season. I mean, who ever thought that Chicago Bulls 72 win season would ever be supplanted? And it was by the Golden State
Yeah.
Warriors of the 2016. And so what happened is that Draymond Green got into an minor altercation with LeBron James. LeBron James, I think, kind of stepped over him, while Draymond Green fell on the ground and stepped over him. And that's usually like a bad, kind of disrespectful move. And Draymond Green, essentially got up and took a swipe at his privates, and then from there he got suspended, and that essentially costed the Warriors game 5, and then also the game 6 because he got suspended for game 6, and then of course Andrew Bogut. We forgot Andrew Bogut also got hurt, which is part of the reason why they lost, not because of Draymond Green. But anyway, so that was the first one, and then the second time is a highly publicized with Kevin Durant. There was an event where, in 2019, 2018, 2019 season, there was Draymond Green was, trying to bring the ball up, and Kevin Durant was, clapping for the ball, clapping, give me the
Yeah.
ball. And Draymond Green went ahead and took the ball up and proceeded to do a turnover. And then you see on the
Yeah.
bench that, there was an altercation there. And that was the beginning of the end of the whole Kevin Durant, tenure with the Golden State Warriors. And again, you can pretty much say, Draymond Green cost that one because that could have been a multiple, maybe 3-peat, 4-peat with that, Kevin Durant on
Right.
the team. But it ran its course. That whole relationship with Kevin Durant and Draymond Green soured at that time. I mean, they're good friends now, but at the time it just soured. And then, they had he's got a long history of suspensions, with respect to technicals. He's always barking at the refs. So that's part of the reason why you see. And then the most recent ones the most recent alter or infractions were this year, and this is what led to the suspension, the indefinite suspension. You had, Rudy Gobert, who, there was an altercation between Jaden McDaniels and Klay Thompson, and then Rudy Gobert went after Klay Thompson, and that's when Draymond Green went after Rudy Gobert, got him in a headlock. It was pretty excessive. I mean, it was a headlock, and you can see Rudy Gobert flailing, as if he was, couldn't breathe, and it's a bad look for the NBA. They did, that was rightfully, there's a rightful suspension on that play, so that was probably a little bit more violent, honestly, than the last one. But then, not that much further, a few more games later, you see another altercation between, Draymond Green and Yusuf Nurkic, who's the center for the Phoenix Suns. And then you see Draymond Green reacting violently and swaying his arms, and essentially hit Yusuf Nurkic right in the nose, and that's what brought us to where we're at today. And now he's
Yeah,
back
yeah.
from that 12-game suspension, and now he's back, and his first game was last night. And he already started asserting himself, at least with the team. Essentially, called out the team on a press conference, saying that our team, the Golden State Warriors, we're soft. We can't defend. He's trying to send a message to the team that, hey, look, you got to be accountable. You got to, and this is that's his role. That's what he is, and he's trying to instill that again. He's trying to take over the leadership role, who he is. And then, and Steph Curry, Steph Curry knows that that's his role, and the coaching staff knows that's his role, and it's just we're going to find out whether or not he still has that voice with the team. We'll
Right.
find out.
I agree. I agree. It's funny because when I was reading that on LeBron James, I'm like, oh, he wanted to see if LeBron was king or queen. Grabbing
Nice,
the junk.
nice, nice.
Now, for the record, he has been hit for 163 technical fouls, and he's paid about $1.2 and a half million, a little bit over that, in his NBA career. But I think I mean, he don't worry about it, Draymond Green fans. He's got $100 million contract, which he has to stay on this path because every contract has a
Right.
morals clause. And look, that's a foreign owner. He's from China. This new owner. Those guys, they don't play business. I mean, it's business and or get the bleep out of here. It's like, look at the Brooklyn Nets owner, man. He sold off all his players there, said screw this, and we're gonna rebuild when he had the dream team there. So be careful, Draymond. You're gonna force that guy into a corner too. Uh, now, his solution was he was supposed to receive counseling and work with the Warriors and NBA while suspended and meet certain criteria. So the assumption is he has met that criteria. Long term, do you think, and this is pure speculation, people, there's no proof either or, but Eddie, does your gut tell you he will learn from this, or he's eventually going to get suspended again? Or you don't know? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, the track record shows that he's going to get suspended again, right? But Draymond Green's a really smart guy. Don't let the kind of um, I don't want to say the ghetto or the strong personality, the way he is, right? Kind of the street life, kind of the way he is. And he grew up in a rough part of Michigan, so don't let that fool you. The
Street
guy's a real
smarts.
smart guy. He's street
He
smart.
has
He's
street
really, really smart.
smarts. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's really,
Yeah.
really smart. He's got a high basketball IQ. He can talk. He's got the gift of gab. He wouldn't have had that TNT analyst, deal, if he doesn't have the chops to do it. And he's just a smart guy. So, but the thing is, it's emotionally is he intelligent enough to figure this out? And that's what we're going to find out. He's got the smarts as a person. It's the emotional intelligence, which a lot of people say is actually a higher reference to being, intelligent, is the emotional EQ is usually the real sign of intelligence. But we shall find out if he's able to do that. I honestly think because he is smart, and because I think he recognizes that what kind of an impact this will have on the team, because he's already somewhat lost them a little bit. He's trying to get it back, and then he has this other deal with TNT. I don't know. I think he'll smarten up and get better. Will he get suspended again? Probably, but I don't think it'll be this year. Maybe sometime next year.
Everything Eddie said, people. is the optimistic look. I could say everything with the more negative look, so I'm not going to get into it. All I will say is if he uses the tools Eddie mentioned tools to work with, yeah, he won't get suspended because if you're practicing these tools daily or multiple times a week, it helps you focus on your anger issues. I had
Right.
anger, dude. When I was young boy, I was an emotional fireplug, especially in the Navy. That's why I stopped drinking. Man,
Is it really?
I'm that guy who is I'm He-Man, with a couple of drinks in
It
me,
doesn't surprise me, by the way. It doesn't surprise me that you're like that at all, you know?
But,
And
but,
I'm the
but I
complete opposite of you, man. Complete opposite.
exactly,
It takes a lot
exactly,
to piss me off.
exactly,
But when it happens, watch out, man. That's all I'm saying.
exactly. And with
Yeah,
that, let us move on to our next time. Well, first of all, we do wish Draymond Green the best. We do.
for
Just
sure.
it doesn't matter whether we like him or not. It's bad karma to wish ill on somebody. It's like, you could be in that position. So much success in using these tools of Draymond Green, and let's move on. All right. So Eddie has talked about the new NBA rule regarding load management. I actually found out, Eddie, it's called, and Eddie knew this
Player
already.
participation.
There you go, brother. And you talked about it a couple times. I don't have a nice analogy to go with it. So tell us what happened.
Well, so the NBA wanted to crack down on, the load management. That's been kind of going on for the last 5 years, maybe even longer. And what's happened is that kind of started tarnishing the brand of the NBA because a lot of these fans pay a lot of money to go see games. And a lot of the times, whether it be for the visiting team that they're coming to see the opposing players or whether their home team, a lot of times when there's a favorable matchup between, the home team and the away team or vice versa, some of the coaches would go ahead and have, some of these players take a seat and take a rest. And what happened is that this has kept happening over and over and over again, and there's a lot of backlash from fans that the NBA wasn't cracking down on this. So they had attempted to kind of crack down on this in previous years, but this year I think this is the one I think they kind of figured it out. And what it is that an NBA team has the way it was initially written, at least the way I understood it initially, was that they were trying to crack down on more on the NBA all stars and all NBA players. That's who these fans want to come and see. And I
Right.
thought that when I saw the rule initially, that's who were they initially targeting, and they still are targeting that because for these televised games, they definitely are trying to get the best of the best to play at those games, right? So they definitely have cracked down, but I think the player participation tells you that they're also trying to crack down on teams not necessarily resting their star players, but any players. And this is what happened
Right.
with the Brooklyn Nets, is because the Brooklyn Nets sat 4 players in one game, and they were all medically cleared to play, and they just rested all 4 of these players. And these guys are all rotational pieces. You have like a Spencer Dinwiddie type.
Right.
You
Right.
have a Cam Thomas. You have a Nick Claxton. These guys are not like superstar players in the NBA, but they are like they're 4 of the better pieces on the Brooklyn Nets. So they cracked down on them and they fined them $100,000. And the first infraction for this player participation policy is $100,000. The second infraction, so if the Brooklyn Nets were to do this again, it would be $250,000 for that infraction. And then if they did it again the third time, it would essentially be a $1.25 million fine on top of that.
Right.
So it gets, and then the next one after that is $1 million on top of the previous fine. So it continues to escalate. So I understand why the NBA did that. They have to protect their brand, and there's a lot of backlash. They don't want people starting not paying for tickets anymore because that's essentially the revenue generation for the league. Of course, TV ratings as well, or TV contracts is also how they make their money. But if fans are starting to backlash or not watching TV, it's going to affect the brand. So this is why they did it. And I think
Yeah.
they're trying to do the right thing and protect the brand. So
I agree. I agree. I mean, it's well, first of all, for the audience, in the 1990s, the NBA would rest their players on average, their stars for like 10.6 games within a season, and in the 2000s, it was 23.9. So that was a big massive jump. And the other reason, Eddie talks about it being the fans and all that. Eddie's right. I mean, that's a part of it. The Nets actually showed the NBA had to sell merchandise at games, how to maximize their potential. So games and the NBA followed. The Nets were like the worst team in the league in the 80s or 90s, and they became the number two merchandise and ticket game sales in the league, despite the fact they were losing. If you're a sales rep, you gotta pick up the book How to Sell Ice to the, or I Can Sell Ice to the Eskimos, or How to Sell Ice to the Eskimos. It was written by the vice president of the new of the net New Jersey Nets at the time, and he was the one who implemented all this. Great book to read. Okay, so they were fined 100,000. I also think the penalty should start at 1 million. I mean, we're talking ungodly money these leagues make. So this 100,000, that does nothing for me. Do you? Why did they target rotation? Oh, and my final point is what Eddie was saying about the fans is true. But the bottom line is they care more about their TV ratings. That's where the $1 billion contracts come. And
For
Eddie's
sure.
absolutely right. If their star player is not playing that game, and that's why they like the team, that player is going to go to Dr. Phil, or Oprah or somewhere else to watch some TV. And
Right.
that was, to me, I have no proof, but to me, that would be their biggest fear, because that's why they have the in-season tournament. They're trying to stabilize and, if possible, raise these ratings, because they know that contracts in the future are cloudy. This is their last few years of these leagues making killer contracts, because, as you can see, cable's changing. So do you think this will deter the Nets or any other team, only 100,000, or do you think they're just going to say, screw this, I'm going to bite the bullet and rest King James here for the next few games?
Let's put it this way. I mean, teams can still rest their players. They can. So as long as they don't do more than one, right? So LeBron James can go ahead and take a rest, even if it's a nationally televised game. Although the league would not want him to do that. But if he needs a rest because he's an old guy, he's 39 years old, man, right? If he needs a rest, the team can go ahead and do that, right? They just don't want to have LeBron James and Anthony Davis resting on the same exact day, right?
Okay, hold on.
Unless
So,
Anthony Davis is injured, right? Then that's
well,
the
give,
that's the deal.
well, give me one example. So my take is, if LeBron James is rested on Christmas Day and they're playing the Boston Celtics, or some rival, or they're playing
Right,
Golden State, some rival, and he
right.
rests, he wouldn't get suspended. What would give me an
No,
example? Okay, give me an example of they're playing on Christmas Day and they rest them, and they would be found guilty. What would be triggering that? Meaning he had been rested the day before too, or so. I'm confused as to what actually triggers it.
it's the amount of star players that are resting at the exact same game. That's what triggers it. So in this case, for LeBron James, let's just say that he was getting a rest night day, and they gave him the rest night, and he's not injured, right? But if Anthony Davis is injured and he sits because he's injured, they don't get fined. But if he's
Right.
being rested because he is not injured, they have two guys that are rested that are not injured, they get fined. That's how it
So
works. Is that
so they
yeah.
can they be fined if it's just one person? It sounds like if it's just one person.
No, no,
Okay, gotcha.
no,
All right.
no, no.
All right, brother. I believe you. It's not my domain. It just seems a little odd, because if it's Christmas Day and they're not playing, I'm the commissioner and LeBron's not playing, I'm calling the Lakers up before tip off. What the hell is your problem here?
Unless he's injured.
Right.
If he's
Oh
injured,
yeah, yeah,
then
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
he can't
yeah,
play.
yeah,
But if he's
yeah.
not injured, they can do that. But LeBron James is a smart guy, man. He's not. If he can play, he's gonna play, man.
Oh no,
He's not
that's
gonna.
just an
Yeah,
example of a name people
yeah,
would recognize. That's all. Yeah.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right, sir. Let us move on. The NBA trade deadline is approaching. February 8th is the deadline. So I asked Eddie about potential players that we may be looking at, and I sent him a bunch of players, and I just, Eddie, give the floor is yours. How do you want to talk about this? You want to hit us up? Who do you think? Well, first of all, who are the top names you think could be talked about? And then who are the top names you see actually getting moved?
So here's the deal: is that the way these NBA trade deadlines how they operate is that usually there are like a handful of teams in both the East and the West that have disappointed, And
Yeah.
we're almost at the halfway point of the season. Usually the All-Star break is pretty close to the halfway part of the
Mhm.
season, although it's mostly more than halfway the part of the season. But you look at teams that at least before the season began were targeted to be pretty good teams, and for whatever reason they're just not working out. They're just they're not blending as they had hoped, right? So teams that come to mind that fit this criteria, that are disappointments to this point, and have players that are good on that team that essentially could be offloaded, or traded to another team, to a contending team, in the case of these teams maybe wanting to rebuild or retool for the future, right? So in the
Right.
East, the four teams that come to mind that I think fit this criteria, first I think is Toronto Raptors, and they've already made a move already with OG Anunoby going to New York Knicks, in
Right.
exchange for uh, uh, um, Precious Achua, and then also I forgot his last name. Anyway, it's one of the 6 men of the year type guys. Anyway, I'm trying to remember his name, but it's just escaping me right now. But anyway, so Pascal Siakam is actually going. It was just announced today that there is a deal on the table, um, potentially between the Indiana Pacers and the Toronto Raptors. For I think there's going to be a lot of draft capital involved in this trade. From what I hear, that the Indiana Pacers are giving up to get Pascal Siakam, and Indiana is a team that is actually competing. In the for playoff positioning in the East. So that team comes to mind is Toronto. The second team is Emmanuel Quickly was the guy I was trying to remember that New York had given to Toronto. So
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
it
Gotcha.
was
Gotcha.
Emmanuel Quickly and Precious Achua. As my memories, as you get older, it just anyway, yeah, senior moments. Anyway, the second team that comes to mind in the East is the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago
Bulls.
Bulls have like three really good players on that team that they had initially when they put them all together. And the three players I'm talking about are Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and then Nikola Vucevic. These three players, and then of course Lonzo Ball as well, but he's been hurt. He has an issue with his knee.
Right.
But they have these four players that all came together, and they thought, wow, this team could be, competing, because they have really good players that are all complementary and they all kind of help each other out. But for whatever reason, this team hasn't really gelled. So these four guys or three guys, I think, are also guys that could be moved to a contender. And these players are all coveted by a lot of teams in the NBA. So Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic are big names that I think that could be moved at the deadline. Another team in the East is the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets, the aforementioned Brooklyn Nets, who just got fined for this, player participation load management rule. They have a player, Mikal Bridges, who they got from the Phoenix Suns, who actually emerged to be like a really, really good player. But I think they're finding out that this guy isn't necessarily a one, a top tier one, guy, the number one guy on a great team. He's more of a complementary piece. He's probably more of like
Right.
the second or third best player on a championship team, not necessarily the first. And he's being paid kind of like almost like a first at Brooklyn. But this guy is very, very highly coveted for multiple reasons, because he's a very, very good defender. He's an all NBA team defensive player. He actually has a pretty good offensive game. So he's another guy that I think that is going to be potentially traded. And then the fourth team in the East that I think comes to mind that has good players that would probably get traded, is Trae Young for the Atlanta Hawks. And then you also have
Oh yeah.
DeJounte Murray, another guard like in the East. And then Clint Capella is another one that's a center for the Atlanta Hawks. These guys are all kind of high paid players. They're all very, very versatile. They're all difference makers. So all these guys are big names. I think that teams that are competing in the East or the West would try and go after. Um, on the West, so I picked four teams in the East. I'm gonna pick four teams in the
Oh,
West.
so
Go ahead.
Eddie, one thing I did notice, and you kind of alluded to it. So, for example, it looks like the Hawks, it's money involved in it. Hey, we're not playing so well. Let's get rid of this big contract. And then I
Right.
noticed that with a lot of these guys, it's like they would keep them, I think, if their contracts weren't so overbloated. It seems like that's a big reason some of these players get moved because, you know, uh, a team can absorb the hit, but they don't want the contract anyway. And if they can get draft picks, I think it's draft picks is what I noticed too
For sure.
when you mentioned that. And the thing that disappoints me about that is, what's the draft pick where well you can't get it if we're going to pick up here and it gets defaulted to the next year. There's a term for that.
Protected,
I learned the
unprotected, protected.
the protected
There's
where they don't
protected.
necessarily give up. Yeah, yeah, so I found this all fascinating, but I want to give props out because all these players you named, there's a writer called Sam Vecini over at the Athletic, and has a great article on this for anybody who's looking. And Eddie's mimicking a lot of what he's saying, just good writer, and it kind of validates what Eddie says too, in the sense of he knows this stuff inside out. So I apologize. Just wanted to get that plug in for
No
Sam
worries.
Vecini.
Hey, get him. I'll
And
tell you this right now. I'll tell you this right now. I didn't even read any of that stuff, man. I just know this from just watching games and
no,
knowing basketball.
exactly.
These are guys that I just looked at, and I just did it independent on my own without looking at the list of players that you had there. Although I can look at the list of players now as we go through it, but I did these all on my own. I just know hoops, man. I know it. So, do you want to keep going, or I can go to the
No,
West?
keep going. Keep going.
All right.
Keep
So
going.
in the
Oh, no,
West,
no, no. Yeah, keep going. Go ahead.
in the West, there are four teams that I've identified that have players that I think could be moved. So first, although this team is actually doing better than I think people anticipated, especially most recently, because they're one of the hotter teams in the NBA right now. But they're still a play-in team right now in the West because the West is so deep. There's a lot of good teams
Yeah.
in the West, and not all of them are going to get in the playoffs. So, but this team, the Utah Jazz, has definitely been playing very well as of late. And they actually were a surprise team last year, at least early on in the season. And then they kind of came back down to earth. But they have a team, Laurie Markkinen, who is actually a very, very good player, very, very high coveted guy because he can shoot. He's a big guy. He's like 6', I think he's 7 foot. He came from the Cleveland Cavaliers. At one time, the Cleveland Cavaliers had 3 7-footers on their team in the starting lineup, and he was one of them. So
Wow.
he's now at the Utah Jazz, and he can shoot. He's a very good player. And then, so he's one of the guys that I think could be moved, as well as Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson is one of these 6-man type of players, kind of a streaky type of shooter, instant offense kind of guy. He's a guy that I think could be moved to a contender as well. The other team that comes out, other than the Utah Jazz, there's 3 other teams I'll mention in the West. The Los Angeles Lakers. This is a surprising development because at the Los Angeles Lakers, when they did all these moves in the offseason, I'm like, oh my God, this team is ready to compete because they're so
Right.
deep. They
Yeah.
were deep. I mean, they are still very deep. For whatever reason, they're just not meshing very well, right? I don't know why. I don't know what it is. There's been a lot of speculation that there's locker room issues between the coach and a few of the players, namely Austin Reeves, who is just one of the players I'm gonna name here. There was a lot of talk about him and Darvin Ham not necessarily seeing eye to eye, creating some issues, in the locker room. So he's one I think that could be targeted to move. Another guy that's on that team that, I think he's revitalized his career, honestly, is D'Angelo Russell. I think early on in his career, when he was with the Lakers, he had a bad name for himself because he kind of tattled on one of his players, about some kind of issue with the wife. I don't know exactly what happened, exactly the details, but it has something to do with that. And, so he was kind of like looked at as a tattletale. And I think he revitalized his career when he went to the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets is when he actually revitalized his career. And then, he was with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Warriors, and he came back to the Lakers. But he's a high price guy. He actually has a skill set. I think they can get something for him, if they move him. And the last 2 pieces that I'll mention on the Lakers is Christian Wood as well as Torian Prince. These guys are more they're not star players. They're more rotational pieces, but they're valuable rotational pieces for teams that are wanting to compete for a title or playoff positioning. The third team in the West that I'll bring up, I brought up Utah Lakers. The third team are my Golden State Warriors. It has been very, very evident that there's a lot of turmoil in that locker room. And
Right.
unfortunately, I think that we're going to see this team get busted up. And I think it's been pretty clear that, at least the beat writers here locally are all indicating that the Warriors are going to be very active at the trade deadline. And everybody's on the table except for Steph Curry. So that's a lot of speculation is breeded from that. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they move, off, Chris Paul is one guy, but he's
Right.
injured. He's got a very attractive contract. So I think that's why he might be moved. Draymond Green, he has all these issues right now. I mean, but, if Steph Curry wants Draymond Green in the team, he's going to stay on the team. And Steph Curry and Draymond
Right.
Green are very, very, very close. And, and like I said before, Draymond Green is a vital piece to that team. But, management might have gotten tired of his antics and they might want to put him on the trading block. Klay Thompson is another name that has come up. He doesn't have a contract. He has an expiring contract. He's due for renewal this year. And he could be a rental for a team that's trying to compete. And the Lakers are a team that's linked to both Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. Potentially getting them. So there could be something in the works there in the horizon, a 3-team deal that could involve those guys. And the piece that's the much maligned, unfortunately, and we don't know exactly what happened with this guy, with Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, for whatever reason, last year had some issues. We don't know exactly what happened, but some family issue had happened. There was a lot of speculation of what it could be. It could be had to do with his kids, had to do with his dad. We don't know. His dad used to be an NBA player, Mitchell Wiggins, for the Minnesota Timberwolves back in the day. So we don't know. We don't know what's going on, but there's something. He's not necessarily 100% right. We know that Jordan Poole's a very good friend of his, and Jordan Poole's no longer on the team. We don't know if there's some kind of fallout from that. Maybe he's one of these kind of quiet, cerebral types, and maybe he just didn't fall in line with what management's decision to keep Draymond Green and shipped out Jordan Poole. Maybe he just got pissed off. We don't know. There's a lot of speculation about what happened with Andrew Wiggins, but 2 years ago that guy was a beast. He's the second best player on that team in the championship game against Boston, the championship series. He was the second best player, and he probably would have got MVP if it wasn't for Steph Curry. So it's
That's
unfortunate
right.
yeah.
I remember
He's
that now.
very well.
The world
Yeah,
knew who Wiggins was that series because he played such. In
absolutely.
fact,
He was an all-star that year too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he's fallen big time for. We don't know exactly what's happened, but there's something mentally, and it could be just a change of scenery that's needed for the guy. But it's very, very evident that they're probably going to move him. So if I were a bet man, I would say he's the one that's probably going to get moved. He's got I think he's got a contract that's appealing as well, along with Chris Paul, and I think they can get something for those two guys. Not a difference maker, but someone that's probably going to be a better complementary piece than those two guys on the team currently. And the last team I'll mention in the West are the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, this is a team that I picked early on in the preseason rankings. I thought these guys were going to be like maybe the 6th or 7th seed, and right now they're not even they're worse than the Warriors right now. And even though they beat the Warriors last night, without a lot of their star players, they're just a team that's a mess. We don't know what's going on. So Ja Morant is somebody that could be moved. You don't know. We don't know. I mean, they can get a lot for that guy, a lot of draft capital to rebuild that team for the future. And they have Steven Adams. Steven Adams is a valuable piece that a lot of teams covet, and I think he could be moved too to get some trade capital or some draft capital for the future. So those are the teams I'm targeting, and those are the players I would say that are the most the possibility of them moving is high. All of the guys that I just mentioned.
Right. If Ja Morant could go to the Bulls, to the Celtics, to the Lakers, or to the Knicks, he feel right at home with
Difference
his
maker.
gun.
Difference
With his
maker.
gun. I'm making
Yeah,
a
the
joke.
thing is, he's out for the season though. He had surgery, season-ending surgery, so he's out for the season. But he still could be traded. I mean, he's still got value for the future. So we'll see.
No, I get you. I'm just like, what a moron with the gun ho incident. It's like,
Yeah,
man, you have this great career in front of you, and that's how you treat it. All right, Eddie, we will revisit this next week, analyze trades that have gone down, and how that affects other trades. Because people always forget when one player's traded, that creates a domino effect sometimes, and it triggers other moves. Whether a team goes or our A player's gone, let's make the move for the B player. So it's always interesting. The final question before we move on: do you see? You talked about potential trades, but how serious do you think trades? I mean, like the NFL, you'll get a couple of NFL trade deadline, and then no moves ever get made. In the NBA, I mean, add all these players, you expect some of them to actually get moved, don't you?
absolutely. I mean, Pascal Siakam is already about to be moved. For the Indiana Pacers. He's going to go to the Indiana Pacers. I mean, that's what's been talked about. We don't know exactly for what and for what players, but he's definitely going to be on the table. It's going to be a very active, trade deadline for sure. I would
All right.
say my prediction would be I would say at least 10 deals are done. At least like 10
Wow.
noteworthy deals I think are done. Yeah.
Man, that's about it. Like 5 to 8 years worth of NFL trade deadlines. They don't make a lot of moves. Of course, the salary cap is much more. I mean, the NBA does not have a salary cap. They have a salary cap in name. They got an exemption for literally everything. And some of the
Right.
exemptions are good. Some of them are just clearly to circumvent the salary cap. And I can't blame the NBA. they're trying. I mean, you got 6 to 10 million viewers for the NBA final versus 80 million for the Super Bowl on a bad year. Okay, speaking of Super Bowl, Eddie, thank you for that update. We will visit that next week again. But let's move on to the National Football League and Wild Card Weekend. Eddie and I are going to talk about some of the games. First of all, the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers were on bye. They will the Ravens will be hosting the Texans at home, and Eddie and Ravens are the number 1 seed. The Texans are the number 4 seed. Eddie, tell us who's your team, the Niners, hosting.
They're hosting the Green Bay Packers, who just lambasted the same team that Niners lambasted weeks ago in
Oh
the
my
Dallas
God,
Cowboys.
did they?
That was kind of embarrassing. I
And
mean, I think McCarthy's
embarrassing.
gone. Honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't fault McCarthy on this one. And for the record, the Packers are the number 7 seed, the last seed. No number 7 seed has ever beaten a number 2 seed until this year. And you know what, Eddie? The final 2 weeks of the season, I reminded people, the Cowboys are not invincible at home. That record was unofficially broken by the Lions, and the refs gifted them the win. And the Packers proved me correct. But we're going to talk about that game shortly. I want to first talk about the Houston. Man, Houston destroyed Cleveland. What were your
Absolutely, they
thoughts,
did.
Eddie, about that game? Look, the Houston rolled out 356 offensive yards. Stroud's playing like a veteran, not like a rookie. What were your thoughts of that game?
I mean, I think that was the CJ Stroud coming out party. I mean, geez, that guy played awesome. I mean, poised. I mean, who? I mean, this guy doesn't look like a rookie. I mean, I would have never thought coming out of Ohio State this guy would be this good, honestly, because Ohio State doesn't really have a good reputation of having great quarterbacks that come into the NFL. So the fact that this guy is doing what he's doing in his first year, taking a team that had Deshaun Watson previously, was also a player who was actually pretty good, coming out of
Clemson.
the championship game, right? In the college football, and he came on the Texans and took him pretty far initially. I think brought him in the playoffs at least 1 year, and then all hell broke loose with all the massage stuff. And now he's no longer there. He's now, he went up against his old team in Deshaun Watson playing for the Cleveland Browns, and he wasn't even playing, right? He could have played against his old team. That would have been a nice story, but that didn't happen, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, D'Amico Ryans has got this team like believing. I mean, that's the one thing that came out is that this team is playing hard. CJ Stroud is playing awesome. You got Nico Collins. Who is that guy as a wide receiver? And all of a sudden, that guy's looking like a stud and a star. So then you have Devin Singletary, who's the running back, who's doing very well. So, I mean, unbelievable. This team and their defense, 2 touchdowns. They had 2 scoring touchdowns. Joe
Yeah.
Flacco, Joe Skinny, I call him, Flacco in Espanol, right, is skinny.
Yeah.
So he threw 2 pick sixes in that team. And, amazing. I'm impressed with this Texans team. They're doing way better than anybody anticipated. And you got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, D'Amico Ryans has done a very good job there.
He's easily the coach of the year. Yeah, you're right. CJ Stroud's playing like a veteran, not a rookie. My real take on Stroud will come next year after there's enough film and all that. It's kind of like Jalen Hurts had a monster season last year.
Yeah.
People were like, "Oh man, he's a superstar." I go, he's on his way, but I'd like to see it. No, I don't judge him based off of 1 year because the next season there's a lot of film on them, and
Yeah.
teams can anticipate. And I'm not saying Stroud's going to come back down to earth, but that's when I make my final judgment. But he's playing some hell of a good football. And the stats are deceiving. He was 16 of 21 for 274 yards and 3 TDs. He was efficient. And winning is not about superstar stats. It's about winning. And he did everything he needed to do. And you're right, the 2 pick sixes. It was just a great game for the Texans. And before we move on, I'll say this. I mentioned to you, Eddie, plenty of times during the season. Look, the Browns have an elite team that is inconsistent. They play up and down to their opponents, and I told you. I mean, I have said it specifically, but I know I wrote it in my article multiple times. This will come back to haunt them once they start playing better teams. And Myles Garrett, the long shot MVP candidate, He disappeared. I think he had like 2 quarterback pressures. That was it. There was one play where he was made the fool. Well, not his fault, just CJ Stroud just does a great move, and there's Myles Garrett rolling over air, hitting the ground. So they've got to become more consistent, the Browns. And I'm wondering how they're going to deal with Joe Flacco. Or is there any intent to bring him back? And what does it say about Deshaun Watson? You get a 38-year-old quarterback playing on pennies on the dollar, outplay statistically what Deshaun Watson has done in 2 years. This is why I don't care for guaranteed contracts in any sport. It's not that I'm against the players. It's about winning. And when you're stuck with the loser, it's going to kill you salary cap wise, or bad contract. But let's move on. The Houston
Yeah,
Texans,
real quick. I
congratulations.
was going to tell you real quick. I was going to tell you the Cleveland Browns are a team to watch out for in the future, though, for sure. I would
Oh,
say
yeah,
next year
yeah, yeah.
they're going to be a team to watch out for because that defense is legit. They're going to have Nick Chubb back, hopefully. They'll figure out their quarterback position, situation. That team they scare me. So I think that team's going to be very good next year and
I,
the year
I,
after.
I don't know about Nick Chubb. That was a devastating injury, and it wasn't his
It
first.
was.
So let's pray that he comes back. I hate players who are young, haven't hit that big contract, and I truly feel for the running backs. So I hope he does come back.
Yep.
And you're right, they are a young team. So we'll see. We'll see. Now the Texans again, they face the number 1 seed, the Baltimore Ravens away. It's a great time for them to shine on that game for the simple fact that Lamar Jackson has his own playoff demons to overcome. So let's hope for a good game. But I think it's going to be D'Amico. It's going to be a chess game, Eddie.
Yep.
D'Amico Ryan's defensive strategy. How will he shut down Lamar Jackson? If I'm the Texans, I'm saying I want to see Lamar go mobile. Because if he's going mobile, he's not throwing. And with our way we pass rush, we seal the lanes, we limit his mobility, just like the Niners did to the Eagles. However, saying that and doing it are 2 different things. What's your take on the upcoming matchup against the Ravens from the Texas standpoint before we move on?
I think the matchup to watch out, honestly, it's not the Texans D and how they contain, the Lamar Jackson. I think it's the Baltimore Ravens D and how they can confuse and create issues for CJ Stroud, which is what they did with Brock Purdy, a few weeks ago, right? I mean, the defense of the Ravens, I think the number 1 rated defense, if I, you know the stats, but they're up there. And they can confuse a player like a CJ Stroud who hasn't seen many schemes on the defensive end. And maybe D'Amico Ryans can prep him for that because he's a defensive oriented type of coach. But that's the matchup to see is, can CJ Stroud solve the puzzle that is the Baltimore Ravens D? The way
Right,
that
right, right.
we shall see. That's to me is the matchup to watch.
Yeah, my assumption is he's going to struggle, but he may not. But that's my assumption. So to me, it's a game the Texans are going to be. We got to hang around, and then we got to let CJ work his deep ball magic. And but to hang around, they're going to have to figure out how to stop Lamar, and that's my take on that one. All righty, the and my title was Houston destroys Cleveland. The next one is the Bills are too much for the Steelers. Look, I'm proud of the fact that I had the Bills as my number 3 team in my power rankings the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and they validated me. I think this was just a game where the Bills are just the better team. They beat the Bills are 12-6 now. The Steelers they beat the Steelers 31-17, and the offense they played up to their standard stuff. But the rushing attack did very well, Eddie. The Bills' offense had 368 total yards. They averaged about 374. So the offense played up to their level in extremely cold weather. The football's heavier, drier, slipperier hands. When you get hit, it's like being punched. But it was the rushing attack. Remember, Eddie, how I talked earlier in the season,
Yep.
how the Bills started winning because they committed to a rushing attack? And look, they had 179 rushing yards. Their average is about 133. The downside is that Josh Allen this week contributed 74 rushing yards, and that's always a big risk for injury. But this is the playoffs. This is where
Right.
you want him to sell out that way. So he's also an upside X factor. What are your thoughts about the Bills and the Steelers?
Uh, you know, there's no surprise. The Bills were a better team. I mean, the Steelers made it a game for a little while. I mean, you got to give it to them. They have a lot of moxie, especially for not having their quarterback. At least the starter who's been out for a few weeks now, and This guy Mason Rudolph has actually played pretty well, and they had some issues with their offensive coordinator. They changed that. They got better. So I got to give it to the Steelers. They had no business being in that game that close, but they find a way to do it because they Mike Tomlin just knows how to coach that team up. You got to give it props to Mike Tomlin. I don't think he's ever had a losing season, and that's amazing
Nope.
considering
Nope.
that
It
this
is.
easily could have been the season that he had it easily.
He's lucky he found Mason Rudolph, and maybe he'll give him a little respect and not cut him and let him battle for the job. Because if Tomlin's been a screw up in anything, it's his quarterback selections after
Yeah.
Roethlisberger. Now defensively, the Bills did lose three players, and that's a concern moving forward. They faced the Chiefs at home. The Chiefs are the number 3 seed. The Bills are the number 2 seed, and I'm pretty proud of the Bills having that number 2 seed because they were the only team not in the playoffs that were ranked in most people's power rankings in the top 10. And they clinched not only the playoff spot, but the number 2 seed. And this is the first game that the Chiefs will be playing away in the Patrick Mahomes era.
Wow.
What's your take? What's your take on that? In that, do you think the home field advantage is enough to take out the Chiefs?
You know what? This game is going to be really close, in my opinion. I don't think, I think Pat Mahomes is still a problem to deal with for any defense, regardless if he doesn't have a wide receiver to throw to. Rasheed Rice has emerged as his go-to guy, at least from a wide receiver standpoint, other than, Travis Kelsey. Isaiah Pacheco, who's also a good running. I mean, he's emerged as a very good running back. In the past, the Chiefs, they were a high-scoring team that teams had to play catch up right with them in order to compete, and now they're not that team anymore. So now they're a different team. They're a run first type of team that has a very, very good defense that's carried them honestly this year, and that defense is for real. So that's why I'm saying it's going to be a lot closer game than meets the eye. I think a lot of people, the betting folks, will probably say Buffalo Bills, because they're at home, they're higher seated, they've been playing very, very well lately. But man, you can't count out Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid anytime he has some time to figure out a game plan. And I think that this game's going to be tough. The conditions, of course, are going to come into play. We shall see. But in my opinion, it's going to be
I
close. But I think
agree.
Buffalo.
And it's funny, they're two different teams now, meaning
Yep,
they're dependent on their
they're both
defense
run
and the
first
rushing
kind of guys.
attack.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. The and regarding the Steelers, Eddie's right. They were valiant. They were down 14-0 and 21-7 at halftime, and yet they still managed to make it a game and make it interesting at the end. All right. Detroit wins revenge game against the Rams. These Los Angeles Rams, that is. The record, they're 13-5. They beat. I thought once again, they played a little disappointing to me. I don't think the game should have been as close, but the Rams made it close. And so my disappointment with the Lions is they don't seem to know how to finish games or put teams down. And again, they won this squeaker, but they can't afford to make some of the mistakes. They only scored 3 points in the second half, Eddie. So they've got to play more consistent football. They got to play 60 minutes of freaking football.
yeah,
Everybody, well, they're this, they're that, they're tough, they're this. Yeah, you're right. But they never give you 60 minutes of football. And that's why I still think they're a year away. But it was the first playoff home game that they won, or the first playoff home game in 32 years, and they won. Lights out in the first half, shut down in the second. Jared Goff gets some revenge. To me, it's like, yeah, you got a little bit of revenge, but Stafford has a ring. You don't. So it really wasn't
right.
much revenge. But he was efficient. But more importantly, he played error free, no turnovers. The
Yes,
Lions tend to lose or go into overtime, have these ungodly close games because of the turnover battle. So that's what I saw out of it. The Rams almost put off the upset, and I'm not going to blame this game on anybody because it wasn't anybody's fault in terms of the Rams losing, but they lost because of bad coaching decision with oh my gosh, with Sean McVay. He
Sean
failed to
Payton.
use his
Not
three.
Sean McVay. I want to say Sean Payton,
Yeah,
but Sean McVay. Yes.
he
Yeah.
failed to use his three timeouts with a minute left, and then the clock ran out on them. And in the second half, he chose to punt, hoping to get the ball back, and the Lions ran out the clock. Now, I just said they lost because of Sean McVay. They did. But I don't blame him for the we're gonna punt and get the ball back. I don't blame him for that decision. There was enough time to make that happen. It just didn't go his way. The not using any three timeouts with a minute left. I saw that game, so I don't really blame him too much because they were pinned deep in their territory. He could have called the timeouts, get things rolling. He was just hoping to get the locker room talking and rejuvenated and come back out. So even though they lost because of Sean McVay's coaching decisions, I don't blame him at the same time. What's your take on this, Eddie? This game?
I thought it was, in my opinion, the game of the weekend. It was obviously, I think, the closest fought battle. That I think that just, there's a good storyline with Matthew Stafford coming back against his old team, and Jared Goff, of course, going against his old team that he went to the Super Bowl with. I think the storyline was great, and I think it set up for a great team, a great game. And the Detroit Lions, yeah, as conservative as they were in the second half, and of course, as you just alluded to, some of these these calls done by Sean McVay, it just made for a good game. And the better team won. The Detroit Lions are a
Right.
team to watch out for. They're just
Oh,
learning
they
how to
are.
win. And Dan Campbell's got these guys playing hard. You got to give it to him, man. When his first press conference, he's talking about eating knees and eating elbows and all this stuff. Man, it sounded like Mike Singletary back in the day when he
Oh
used to coach
yeah,
the Niners.
yeah. Oh poor man,
But
I
yeah,
felt
but the
so
thing is
bad.
that yeah, but he's the team loves this guy, and they play hard for him, and they're a talented bunch. You got to give it to them. They have great positional players, key positional players, great running backs, and Jameer Gibbs is going to be a stud. David Montgomery's great. You have Amon Ross St. Brown, who's
Yeah,
emerged
yeah.
as one of the top wide receivers in the league, and so you got to give it to them. And then they have this Sam Laporta, who he's a rookie tight end coming out of Iowa, and he's a stud. So this team is definitely going to be an issue, and they have a great offensive line. I think they just need to learn how to win, and they're going to be a problem
Right,
for years to
right.
come.
Their only downside, Eddie's they got one of the league's worst secondary. So I think that's
Yeah,
going to burn them eventually when they play one of these high-power teams. And the final comment I'm going to make, and I'm going to separate Eddie from this, is my personal comment because I'm involved in politics. Jamel Hill, who hates
oh yeah,
everything white, said that Dan Campbell got this job because he was. We are
really?
still waiting for comment from her regarding Dan Campbell taking the Lions, getting the Lions to their first playoff home game in 30 some odd years and winning. We have not heard from the Jamil Hill camp. I'm just tired of the racism. It's like Todd Bowles. They just showed a
Oh,
clip of him asking about him and oh my God, I'm drawing a head scratcher. The only other black coach in the league. Why am I drawing a blank here, Eddie? Who's the
Mike
other one?
Tomlin?
Yeah, yeah, Mike Tomlin. He had there asking, "Hey, do you guys talk this?" He goes, "Yeah, we're friends and all." He goes, "But I'm friends with a lot of white coaches too. We don't look at it that way. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
the
yeah.
media trying to generate this." Because in sports, you don't care. It's like, dude, I mean, the Giants loved Jason Sehorn. They didn't care that he played quarterback and was white. That camaraderie,
Right, right.
overcomes, and that's why they love Dan Campbell because he's a former player and he uses
Yeah,
that to help bond with the team. And
yeah.
so God,
Well,
what's
real quick,
Jamil Hill?
isn't Mike McDaniel also biracial, by the way? He's
He
part
is
black, right?
biracial. It was great, Eddie. I'll tell a quick story and then we'll move on to the next game. So again, I follow politics, and since Colin Kaepernick has become very tribal, that's why I hate the quarterback discussions because if one's white, one's black, it boils down to half the audience talking about the skin color and why one's screwed over or why one should have it, etc. But yes, so when Mike McDaniel's now Mike McDaniel's is biracial. He is.
Hmm.
He looks about as black as I look Latino. So, of course, Deadspin, one of the most racist or one of the most bigoted websites out there. I mean, remember that kid who had the black makeup on one side, then had the non-makeup on the other cheeks. You know how they do the two-tone colors when they go to the game and they dress up as a. He said that was racist. That kid's racist. Blah, blah, blah. Turns out the kid is Native American and it wasn't racist, but that's Deadspin. They do that. So they came out with an article. Yeah, another damn white offensive whiz kid coordinator gets a head coaching job. And somebody tweeted. Now they
Clickbait,
wrote an
man.
article. No, they wrote an article all on that. And somebody said, "Aren't journalists supposed to do research before writing an article? You do
Yeah.
know he's part black, but he looks
Oops.
so like the Deadspin writer assumed." And I play
Yep.
that card all the time. I had Eddie, true story, and I'm sure it probably hasn't happened to you because you look Latino. I've been amongst Latinos, and you know how grandmas are. They got grandkids. Oye, 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 mira ese muchachito allí, un guapito, para tu nieta, It's like, look at that kid over there. He's a good looking kid, with a grandkid there, or your cousin or something. One time I'm listening and I just talked in Spanish. Thank you very much. And you should have seen at these 60, 70 some odd year old women jump back 10 feet. They're more embarrassed than I heard every word they said. So it happens. But my whole issue was you're
Yep.
supposed to be a journalist. You're supposed to research it. That
For sure.
validated and proved what the state of journalism is today. Crap. All right. Let us move on over to the Kansas City Chiefs dominate the Miami Dolphins. Look, Eddie, the weather was a big factor for this. The Dolphins were fins out of their water, their element.
Water.
Uh,
Yep.
and what I've been talking about the last 3 weeks is people ignore it when you win or when you're ranked high. And statistically, they had high rankings that were going lower and lower as the season progressed. But people never look at the 3 or 4 game trends. They look at the season rankings. But the injuries were taking their toll. And I said, look, two things are going to happen if they don't win home field advantage. One, they're going to have to go travel to a cold city. And two, these injuries are going to catch up to them because they're not going to be playing sub 500 teams, and that's exactly what happened. And their secondary was a patchwork. Uh, you know, it, the Chiefs posted 409 total yards, 355 is their average. So even on that terrible weather, Rasheed Rice broke out for 130 yards, 1 touchdown on 12 targets. And impressive, as you were talking about Isaiah Pacheco earlier, they generated 147 rushing yards. 107 is their average per game. And like you said, the defense took control. The Dolphins averaged 261 offensive yards per game, only 188. One of their core strengths that people forget about is their rushing attack. Everybody's passing, passing, passing. But the Dolphins were averaging 132 yards per game, 76. What's your take on this game? To me, it was the weather. It was the Finns were just completely out of their element, out of their water. When you get Eddie, I don't know. Have you ever played a contact sport in the cold? I have. Never
Yeah.
officially, just guys
I am.
running around the military.
Yep.
It, when you get hit, it hurts harder than if in
Yeah.
warm weather.
For sure.
And it lingers and it's more stinging. And
Yeah.
that with the code, I think and the Chiefs were a better team. They beat them 21-14 last time. But I think they could not handle the code. And I think that's what this game broke down to. Your take.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, the better team won. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're the defending Super Bowl champs. And yeah, they're not the exact same team as they were last year. They are still formidable, especially in the playoffs and especially at home. They're just a
Right.
different team now. They're more a run first team, and then use Patrick Mahomes' legs when he needs it and his arm when he can see an opening and the guy doesn't drop the ball. They're a team to beat. So I mean, they're still an issue for any team to reckon with. And the Miami Dolphins, they're still a 1 to 2 years away, maybe another player or two away from being a serious contender.
Right.
They have the capabilities, they have the speed. They're probably the fastest team in the NFL. They just need to figure out, another year under their arms to figure out how to, game plan accordingly with what they have. They've proven that they're a playoff team for years to come. Now they just need to add a few more pieces and shore probably their defense a little bit more. Their defense actually played a lot better than people, thought. They actually did pretty decent. I just think they kind of deviate away from the running game a little bit too much sometimes. I think they become very pass happy because of what they have, and Jalen Waddle as well as Tyreek Hill. So they're a team just like the Detroit Lions, learning how to win, and they're going to be formidable for years to come, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and they shut down Tyree Hill too. In fact, I have it here somewhere. Oh, the defensive line also had no explosiveness to them. The Dolphins. I noted that watching the game, and I believe that's the code. And the NFL once again, is a game of attrition. I talk about that every time we talk football, and they didn't have the depth. Their rushing attack disappeared, as I said, and Tyreek Hill was held in check. 562, 1 touchdown, 8 targets. For Tyreek Hill, that's
Yeah,
being held in check. And this was their third straight
absolutely.
loss where the offense could not keep up with the opposing team's offense, and it was their fewest points all season. I will say this about the Dolphins. I'm a Tua fan. I'm a fan of people who overcome a lot. And those head injuries, all the negative talk, the
Oh,
the
yeah.
the Ryan Clark, you're fat, this earlier in the season, that this, they're that. So I'm a Tua supporter. But that said, I'm also a realist. He does not have the arm strength to go deep with accuracy. His receivers consistently have to slow up. So I believe to take the next step, they're going to have to upgrade that. Does that mean Tua doesn't belong in the NFL? No, he can play in this league, but that his arm strength is not tailored for that specific offense. So
I agree with
I
you.
don't I don't think they're
I
going
agree
to
with you.
ever go to the big dance until they upgrade that. And the final comment on the Chiefs, notice how we talked about their passing yard, I mean their rushing yards, their defense, the kind of like how we talked about the Bills, like you were saying earlier. They've kind of reversed their strengths, and they had to because they were both struggling midseason. The Bills struggled early, middle season. The Chiefs struggled middle, late season there, but they both have recovered. And with Pacheco playing now because he was hurt for a couple games, it's going to be a fun game to watch. And I think, Eddie, it's going to be a game dictated by a few big plays. And in those big plays, it's going to be one or two big turnovers or something, something odd that creates a game-changing momentum. I'm looking forward to that game. All right. Any final
Maybe like a
comments?
ref call, right? Maybe the refs get
Yeah.
involved again, right?
And to defend Dan Campbell, poor guy, poor guy, he's been playing not against just opposing teams, but the refs. You're right. Yeah, bad ref call. Oh my gosh. All right, let's go. We got two more games to discuss. We're way over, but I don't care. Let's discuss these two games because they were blowouts all season long. We're gonna first the first one's gonna be the Dallas Cowboys are embarrassed by the Green Bay Packers. And all season long, we talked about the Niners, Eagles, and Cowboys as being the elite of the elites. And the Cowboys crumbled against the number 2 seed going down against the number 7 seed. The Packers have the youngest roster in the NFL. Jordan Love's growth is not always shown statistically. I watch every game every week. I may not watch the whole game from beginning to end, but I watch enough, and I saw this guy's development. I remember all the errors he was making in the first Monday night game against the Detroit Lions where he lost. And then I saw those errors eventually going away, the chemistry developing. So I am shocked at how quickly he's developed, but I am not shocked at his development. He spread the ball around, Eddie, to 8 players. He methodically ran their version of the West Coast offense. It's about distribution, about hitting the players in stride. Since week 12, he's led the league in passer rating, and he uses legs as they should. I love mobile quarterbacks, but they always get hurt and they never live up to the potential because people don't understand the mobile quarterback in the NFL. Once a mobile quarterback starts to learn how to use his legs like Russell Wilson and Pat Mahomes does to buy time and run when they have to, Jalen Hurts is also learning how to do that. They become monsters. So to see Jordan Love, he's not a rushing quarterback anyway. People assume because he's black, he's a rushing quarterback, but he's able to use his feet properly and mobile. I'm loving this guy, and I've been digressing too much on him already. But the real key to this team is the rushing attack. The rushing attack has been on fire. They're averaging 114 yards for the season. They ran up 148 yards in the last 4 games because his stats were in single digits. His last 4 games, running back Aaron Jones has been averaging 21 touches, but 119 yards and no touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns this last game and no touchdowns the other 4. So it's kind of distorts the average, but it doesn't matter. They can score through the air. They needed him to control the clock and short yardage. And that's why these drives are lasting longer. The defense is young and dumb. They give up yards and points, but it was stout this week, Eddie. They ripped into the Cowboys. The Cowboys put up phenomenal stats, but it doesn't matter. They were 48, and the score was 48-16, and then they just got into the throat, got to throw, and they started connecting.
Right.
And there's 3 minutes left, and they're 2 scores down. So theoretically, they had a shot, even though it was a long shot. So they came on, but that data, those points are deceiving because he had 2 interceptions. Dak Prescott, they were in the first half. when they really needed to get the offense rolling. CD Lamb had no impact until the fourth quarter when it didn't matter. The defense collapsed. Not Dan Campbell, former head coach for the Atlanta
Dan
Falcons.
Quinn. Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn.
Dan
He
Quinn.
was being talked. Yeah, Dan Quinn. They were talking about him, potential head coaching candidate. I think that door was shut with his performance. 510 offensive yards allowed. They were outscored 25-21 in the second half. So the Cowboys recovered offensively. The defense did not. I gave out a lot of information. I apologize. We're running short on time, so I wanted to give a lot of key points. Anything stick out from you with this game, Eddie?
No, they just got their butts kicked, man. You can just tell by the flow of the game that Dallas was in trouble. You can just
Yeah.
tell. The Packers looked way more confident. And Jordan Love, man, that kid is gonna be good. That guy's got a rocket of an arm. He just flings it like, Michael Vick does. Like effortless and just it just zips. He's amazing, man. So, the Niners are gonna have an interesting matchup this weekend against this team because this team matches up well against the Niners from a run first type of offense, and Matt LaFleur knows Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan knows Matt LaFleur. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. But Dallas just got their butts kicked. Yeah, they got their butts kicked, and they got out coached. Matt LaFleur out coached Mike McCarthy, plain and simple, and it was very evident to me from the outset. And and once the Cowboys, once it starts steamrolling in the wrong direction, they can't recover. They just don't know how.
Right,
They're just
right.
So that's my take.
No, I have a slightly different take. I don't think Mike McCarthy was out coach. I think the Cowboys in the first half just completely failed to execute. And like you said, once they started making mistakes, Dak Prescott couldn't overcome. And my take is, look, I have always told you this during these podcasts this year. The Cowboys are soft. They need to get mentally tough. They always pucker up in the playoffs because of the pressure, I believe. And because of this game, and based on how well he played in the regular season, I don't know if Dak Prescott can ever take the Cowboys to the promised land. I think you have a different mindset in the playoffs versus the regular season, and you need a quarterback who can toughen up, who can say, "Yeah, the playoffs are mine." And he's not that. Do you think and as far as Jordan Love, uh, all the accolades about him coming out were that, dude, this guy can do what Rodgers and Favre does, and he can do it better in terms of the talent. And the other thing is he was forced to sit. Look, you have no pressure on you now. To learn to throw you in before you are ready.
Right.
And I think those 3 years really helped them learning from that. Do you think the Green Bay Packers? I don't think they can beat. I think the Steve Wilkes will be able to create some schemes. They've got the 2 edge rushers. I don't think they have enough to overtake the Niners. Any given Sunday, I know, but I just think looking at the numbers, the players, the schemes, I just don't think they have enough to overtake, especially if the rushing attack gets shut down. I think that's going to have to be key to slowing and stopping Jordan Love, is taking the rushing attack away from him and saying, you got to beat us to the air, because I don't know if they can. Your take.
Well, Eric Armstead, who is the defensive tackle on the Niners, has been injured for quite some time now, and he's coming back, and he's one of their main run stoppers. So the fact that he's playing in this game, I think bodes well for the Niners being able to contain Aaron Jones and whoever else they throw back out there. Patrick Taylor. I think AJ Dillon, I think, is hurt. I'm not sure, but I think that guy's Eric Armstead is key to be able to plug the middle up. But Aaron Jones is going to get his. He's a talented running back. He's a fast guy. In space, he's an issue. So, but the Niners have a lot of linebacker talent that I think can contain them. So it remains to be, like you said, any given Sunday. But I think the Niners are definitely, from top to bottom, the more talented team. But talent alone isn't going to win it in the NFL. You have to show up and play hard. And I think that the Niners are hungry to now that the Eagles are out. They're hungry to go to the Super Bowl, and I think they're gonna take out the Packers.
I think so too.
Probably,
Uh,
I think by like 14 points. That's my call.
I think so too. Look, AJ Dillon doesn't always get his. That's a problem. But he's steamrolling right now and getting his. So it's a matter of this team is on a roll. They have momentum, but it's not like they're this dominant beast. And I think the Niners should easily stop it. And I agree. Now, final question. I already said defensive coordinator not Dan Campbell. Oh my God, Eddie, help
Quinn,
me out here.
Dan Quinn,
Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn.
I think the door may have shut on him for head coaching jobs, but 12 wins the last 3 seasons. I don't think this loss is on Mike McCarthy. I think it's on the defense. I don't think Mike McCarthy should be fired. I think the problem is you have a quarterback that can't get over the hump, and that's just the way it is. Same thing with Tony Romo. I think their last two quarterbacks just could only take him so far. Uh, but I think he will get fired here. What's your take?
You talking about Dan Quinn or Mike McCarthy or both?
Mike McCarthy. Mike
Mike
McCarthy.
McCarthy. Yeah, I think he's gone. I mean, you have Bill Belichick, out there, and Jerry Jones is going to try and make a splash with Bill Belichick coming to the Cowboys. Guarantee it. I guarantee you, he's going to go after him.
No,
So I
I
think,
believe it, but I don't know why. What have I said all season long about Belichick without Brady?
yeah, he's not that great of a coach without Brady.
He's a
But
loser. He's a loser. And I don't
yeah,
say it
yeah,
in
yeah.
a derogatory way. It's a fact. He is a loser. So why do you want to bring a loser without the quarterback that brought him 7 rings or however many rings they got? Why?
Yeah,
Because you want to
7.
make a splash. So you're putting your ego and your PR ahead of actually what you need to do with this team. So I think all Jerry Jones is
He's going to go.
validating is why the Cowboys keep losing since the Jimmy Johnson era. You know,
Well, there's
well,
the problem,
technically
man. I
the
mean,
yeah,
Jerry Jones is the GM/owner there, and he runs everything. So he's going to
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
I guarantee
yeah.
it.
I
He's
agree.
going to
I
do it.
agree.
Yeah.
All right. The Buccaneers shocked the Eagles, and it's not even close. I was hoping for a good game. I was hoping that the Bucks could upset him for 2 reasons. I love the comeback story of Baker Mayfield. Right now, if there's a comeback player of the year, that's him. And
Yeah.
I think Todd Bowles is one of the nicest coaches in the league, a true human being, a gentleman's gentleman. Uh, who has played a physical game, who understands the savageness of the sport, so he's able to. He's just a nice guy. I like him. Everything I've read and seen
Right.
from him. So it was excuse me, because I think he was gone if they hadn't made the playoffs, and I think he would have been gone had they been blown out. So I was glad to see them win. Look, the team looked sharp early in the season. The Bucks, remember, they were like 3-0. Then reality
Yeah.
check hit them, and then they were looking like a JV team one week. Uh, 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 a high school team that makes the playoffs, but you don't know what you're getting, But they played with meanness, they played with toughness, and they played with perseverance in this game. They went after it, and more importantly, they didn't look soft. They looked like they wanted it more than the Eagles. They posted 426 offensive yards. Now that said, it's not like the Eagles defense was playing top tier football, but the Bucks had no rushing attack. 90 yards per game is their season average, and that's horrible. They
Yeah.
scrounged up 100, almost 120 yards. The defense limited Jalen Hurts. There were a couple of good passes he got away. But look, my wife and I were watching the game, and even she said with this one play, she goes, "Do they know how to tackle?" Now, if my wife says that,
Oh yeah, they're missing all kinds of tackles. The Eagles.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I always talk about fundamental football because they don't have many pad days anymore, so there's a lot of missed tackles, and it was blatant. Look, the Eagles looked like they quit, and they really looked like they weren't there. It looked like once the Bucks, oh man, they hit me in the mouth, Dad. I don't want to get hit in the mouth, and they quit.
Yep.
Offensively, 276 total yards the Eagles had. Their average in season 350. The rushing game disappeared. 42 rushing yards. Their season average is 124. They lost the time of possession battle. 34 minutes for the Bucks, 26 minutes for the Eagles. Everything went wrong. 30% third down efficiency. What's your take on this game?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the Eagles. They just look like a team that was defeated when they arrived, and that tells me that there's something going on there in the locker room for sure. I don't know exactly if it was AJ Brown. Don't know if it's just the hangover from not being able to get lambasted by the freaking the Niners, and even though the fan base in Philadelphia, they're just they're relentless. So who knows? Maybe this stuff is just hanging over their head. They feel like crap. They just look like a defeated team. And like you said, they got punched in the mouth and they just never recovered. And Tampa Bay took it to them. You got to give it to them. They were the physical team. They took it to them. And the fact that, I knew it was over when that little tush push got stopped. I've only seen that thing get stopped
Yeah.
once. They
I've never
stopped it.
seen it get stopped.
I've only seen it. That was the only time I ever seen it get stopped. I think it was only the second time in the entire season it got stopped. And I think they're the team that did it both times. So I don't know, man. I mean, that's when when that didn't work, you're like, they're done.
Yeah,
They're
it's
done.
kind of like they went. It's kind of like they went through the motions. Oh, we got the whatever they call that play, and the tush
Just
push or
push.
whatever.
Yeah.
And it was funny. It wasn't funny, but it was like, man, you're watching Jalen Hurts slowly getting turned sideways, as they're pushing him
Yeah.
back. Now it took a little at the end there, but they got away with one. But still, you
Yeah.
are correct. That was a defining moment because it was the invincible tush push, and you could tell even the announcers were stunned. They're like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
So look,
Yeah.
I think both coordinators are gone. Uh, I don't. I think Nick Sirianni's job is safe for one more year,
I think
but
so.
the real issue is AJ Brown in the locker room. He helped instigate a cancerous locker room, a cancerous
Yeah.
atmosphere that negated the team from coming together because he pitted the players against the coaching staff, the play calling, all that. I think he was just an envious, bitter guy. He started out red hot. I mean, he was on after his first few games. He was on his way to a 2,000-yard season. Then it started collapsing, and I think his ego was just pissed off. He wasn't getting the ball, wasn't getting his numbers, wasn't getting into the interviews he wanted. And when you have a player like that, him, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, when you get players like that, Santonio Holmes, Plaxico Bird, there's players like that. That to me was 60% of their locker room problem. But you can't give up
Yeah.
on AJ Brown. He's one of the league's elite receivers. So they've got some
For sure.
real questions. What would Eddie Aparicio tell them if you were the consultant? I'm here to fix you. If you want to live and compete for Super Bowls, follow me or come with me. What would you say?
I mean, the AJ Browns of the world are going to exist. It's kind of comes with the territory from being a wide receiver. You're just a diva, right? So you just have to have a strong enough locker room to be able to contain that and deal with it. I mean, the original diva, in my opinion, is probably Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens
Terrell
is the
Owens,
original,
yeah.
right? And then you probably say Randy Moss as well, but I would say TTO is probably even more so than anybody. It's the worst. But you had strong people in that locker room that were able to kind of keep them in check, and that's what I think Philadelphia Eagles. They need that. I mean, they have guys on the defensive end that are pretty strong. Fletcher Cox is a pretty strong personality. I think what's his name? Jason Kelsey, another one who's pretty strong minded. They can contain that guy. Let him. I mean, if he's gonna, he's gonna do what he's gonna do, but they just need to be able to contain it, and they're not gonna be able to control him. They're gonna be. Hopefully, we'll be able to contain him, but it just comes with the territory. It's just the way they are.
I agree. I agree. Look, Baltimore Ravens, all they had was an elite defense. They had an inconsistent offense, but because of strength, desire, perseverance, and this is my locker room, and we are a football team, and we are a family. Us, the quarterback, I would assume he protected Dilfer too, because he loves
You're
Dilfer.
talking about Ray
He's
Lewis now, right? You're talking about Ray
Yeah, Ray
Lewis.
Lewis. Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah,
Yes, Ray Lewis. So I mean, there aren't many Ray Lewises around, but back in the 70s, 80s, you always had that veteran leader, and we got a bunch of prima donnas now in the league,
yeah,
and I think a lot of teams, like Buffalo, they've been struggling to get to the Super Bowl, and I think because they didn't have that strong leadership, that one person, and I think the Eagles will falter, will continue to fail until they bring somebody in who isn't afraid to get into Brown's face and go, "Look, little man."
yeah,
Receiver compared to linebackers, I think,
yeah, yeah.
defensive tackles. Like, listen, man, shut the bleep up. This isn't
Yeah,
your locker room. We don't need this crap. And when
exactly.
that happens, the player may grumble and all that, but they'll walk away and they'll realize
Right.
I've been put in my place. I need to become a team player. They don't have that.
Exactly.
They're not going to
Correct.
get that with two new coordinators. They're going to have to bring a player in just for that purpose. And I don't know if I don't know who's out there, but they have to find it. And with that, Eddie, I think we've covered the NFL. Yeah, I think
Cool.
we got some good games coming back. This is a weekly process. We're going to talk trade again next week. And another great episode. Next week, we're going to talk about more football, divisional round of the playoffs. We're going to see who has been traded, who hasn't been traded. Oh, real quick, Eddie, 1 minute. We'll wait for next week for that. Well, I wanted to talk to Eddie about the Djokovic and Carmelo Anthony fake feud, because it seems to be only coming from Carmelo being upset that that Djokovic wears his number. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because it has more to do with egos and like, what have you actually done for the team to be making those type of statements? You know?
Yeah, let's push it out for next week, man. Let's push it out for next week, man.
Yeah. Until then, everybody, head on over to grumblingsmedia.com. You will find this podcast. You'll find me talking more about Jamel Hill and my Fired Up podcast, which is our political podcast. We have our libertarian podcast. And obviously, we have clips galore. So do not forget, grumblingsmedia.com. On YouTube, we are under the profile of Grumblings Media, as well as on Rumble. You can also listen to the show on Spotify, Apple, Google, and Pandora. And with that, Eddie and we bid you adieu until next time, my friends. Have a wonderful week.
Take care, guys.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.